Greetings, everyone. So before we move on to the agenda, I will just give a small recap on what is integration and why we need it. Integration is how systems and applications are connected to enable them to exchange data with each other or with other systems, right? So no matter what the type of data they are dealing with and on what protocol that is being used between them. So why App Connect Enterprise and what is App Connect Enterprise? App Connect Enterprise is IBM's high performance integration solution to integrate applications and systems on hybrid, on-prem, and cloud. So it combines the existing IIB technology with the new cloud native technologies like App Connect Professional to deliver a platform which has a wide range of integration requirements. So the key features here are uh, collaboration across users. It provides a broad connectivity. It can run anywhere, like I told you. It can be an hybrid platform. It can be on a completely over cloud, or it can be on-prem itself. And it provides flexibility by adding to the SOA architecture the API-led connectivity as well. So ACE provides all the capabilities necessary to cater the needs of an automator and an integration user. The users have a frictionless experience when engaging with developers through the first class integration with IBM API Connect as well. So this provides a pictorial representation of where ACE resides and what are all the components that it can interact with the external system, be it the external system or within ACE itself, like the runtime perspective of it being an integration server, applications deployed to it, the libraries deployed to it. We have an web UI through which the users can perform some administrative actions, and we have the toolkit for the design and development as well. So when I said flexible deployment options, this is what I was inferring to. It can be an on-prem deployment and it can be an over-the-cloud deployment. And both private and public cloud is supported. The public cloud being IBM's Cloud Private, or the public cloud being Azure, AWS, and Google. Okay, so when we say we are moving from IIB to ACE, there are a few features which are abandoned or not found in the ACE latest version. Some of which are the SCA message flow nodes, namely the input node, the reply request, async request, and async response. So these SCA nodes are used to support interoperability between IIB and WebSphere process server. And the WebSphere application server console plugin. So this is also not supported anymore. This plugin, it allowed the WAS admins to control IAB. Then we do not have the decision server. IBM is recommending the use of IBM's operational decision manager instead. So when we say what's changed, these are all the top key features which are currently present in version 11. We have the concept of autonomous integration servers. So a bounding integration node is no more required, but it is still supported. And with the latest versions like FixPact 11.0.0.7, we can also create the standalone integration servers directly from the toolkit. We have a public configuration store which contains the policies which are nothing but the configurable services in the previous version. And the next feature would be we can deploy and monitor the REST APIs which have been developed and deployed to the ACE runtime. Those can be exported to the API Connect as well and can be monitored at a better level. Local queue manager is still an option, but it is not a mandatory like in IIB's versions. We can make use of the remote queue managers. So in the previous versions of even ACE, we had to have a local queue manager to support the event driven applications. but now the remote queue manager can help in that action. So it is redesigned to think of a deployment in a container. So lightweight integration runtimes are thought in mind, and these are deployed as simple processes on container-based environments. So we have also displayed the fixed list that were available with IBM's ACE, the fixed pack version 1, 2, and currently we are at 7, which is the latest. Okay. When we speak about agile integration, this was one of the major concept changes which were taken into account when ACE was designed. So now everyone is talking about microservices architecture. So what is microservices architecture? Microservices architecture is an alternate approach of structuring applications. Rather than an application being a large silo of code all running on a same server, the application is designed to be a collection of smaller, completely independently running components. Okay, so agile integration is an approach that allows all these microservices to be dropped or placed into an architecture seamlessly. Agile integration can also be called as a software developmental practice which favors short, continuous code releases over longer cycles in an attempt to minimize instability and complexity when releasing softwares. It is a complete process of enforcing strict version controlling, immediate issue resolution in order to ensure the stable releases. So we have reimagined integration in terms of deployment, and the perspective is based on microservices architecture. So it has fine-grained the integration deployment using containerization, which provides a much more agile and a scalable environment, decentralized integration ownership. So the ownership is not limited to just the application teams, and every team can work in parallel. And the infrastructure, it is a cloud native integration infrastructure. It is designed to be deployed on cloud and on an hybrid environment. Okay, so like I was talking about a modern integration runtime, this is a requisite for an agile integration to run seamlessly in a container-based environment. It is suited for cloud-native infrastructure deployment techniques. So when we say modern integration runtimes, these are all a list of features or prerequisites it has to deliver. So fast, lightweight runtime. So we say it needs to run in containers like Dockers or an orchestration framework like Kubernetes. So that it can be started and stopped in seconds. Dependency free. So they are no longer requiring databases or message queues, but if needed, it can connect to them at ease. File system based installation. They can be installed simply by extracting the binaries out of a file system and starting them up. DevOps tooling support. Okay, so this is to make it CI/CD ready. Template scripts for standard build and deploy tools should be provided. So it needs to support DevOps, API first approach. So here, the communication protocol should be RESTful APIs. Exposing integrations should be trivial and based on Open API specification. Digital connectivity. In addition to the enterprise connectivity, they must also connect to modern resources. So let's take an example. SQL databases like MongoDB, Cloudent, etc., and messaging services such as Kafka. So these These kind of interactions should also be made possible. On top of this, they also need access to a rich catalog of application intelligent connectors or software as a service contents like Salesforce, like Workday, and so on. So that should also be made possible. Continuous delivery. The delivery is enabled by command line interfaces and template scripts that mesh into standard DevOps pipeline tools. Okay, so this is to facilitate the seamless interaction with DevOps. It reduces the knowledge required to implement these interfaces and increases the pace of the delivery itself. Enhanced tooling. Most interfaces can be built just by configuration alone, rather than having a large code needed to place it and up and running. So it can often be used by individuals with no integration background. So these are all some of the features of a modern integration runtime. Okay, so let's move to the points to consider doing during migration. So migration is a process of converting the legacy to the newer available system as is. Okay, so most of the migration projects are going to replicate whatever is available in the legacy systems as is to the newer solutions with without minimal deviation. But an effective migration strategy would be to use the new features which are available as well. So these are the list of points which we need to consider. And as is environment observation, so we will have to observe the currently running environment, gather points on what needs to be taken into account for an effective migration strategy, to coin the strategy to how to plan your migration, how where we will have a roadmap on how where we are ending at which time with larger stability. Functional and non-functional baselines. So we will discuss about this in the next slides. So baseline is needed to draw a line with what is existing and what we are trying to develop. So we are recommending ACE. So when we are going to ACE, which version are we going to with the proper justification? It can be the latest version so that you are interested in a new features, or it can be a much stable earlier version as well. Configuration and security settings. So we will have to take into account the existing configurations in terms of be it configurable services, some key store entries, and how we are going to export and replicate them in the newer ACE system as well. Migration approach. So we have a few strategies which we can think of, and what is actually our recommendation and why. Post migration steps, there are like a few steps which we need to take into account after the migration is complete in order to maintain a stability and sustainability with the migration which we have currently done. Points to consider. So for this one is basically for the cutover plan. A project cutover is actually a series of tasks that are performed to deploy the components from a developmental or a pre-production environment to the production environment and activate them. So it is basically about when we are going to go live and what happens as a fallback approach in order to maintain stability for the project itself. So these are highlighted as critical elements which we need to consider during the planning phases as well as delivering the migration. Okay, baselines, setting functional and non-functional baselines. So baseline is to ensure that the service consumers and providers are not faced with any untoward behavior in the to be platform or the migrated platform. So it provides us with a list of stuffs which we can compare the existing with the going to uh, application platform. Okay. There are like two types of baselines, functional and non-functional. So functional is pretty much your test cases. So we will have to assimilate or create those functional test cases, execute them in your access system, and save the results to be compared with your to be system, that is your migrated system. Non-functional baselines. So non-functional aspects, when we talk about a non-functional aspect, it is not limited to your performance and throughput alone. We have like other examples, we can talk about persistence, we can talk about expiry, transactionality, and availability as well. So since we are limiting ourselves to an access migration, some of the non-functional requirements will be carried over through the migrated code itself. And hence the project does not have to explicitly need to capture all these metrics. A few examples like persistence, expiry, and transactionality. These are all some properties which are already available and configured in your access system. So those will be already present when we are migrating it to the to be state. So even in non-functional baselines, when we're talking about performance test case, we will be creating them. We will be performing performance testing at the service level, and then at an integration level, uh, including your all your connecting platforms, capturing the results with the metrics and baselining what performance is needed in the to be state. Okay, so these are all ACE migration strategies. So the first one talks about having taken a broker backup in your access environment, creating the list of brokers, bars, configurable services in the access environment. When we are taking a backup that can be extracted to perform an extract migration, we can also perform a parallel migration. So this basically gives a flowchart approach of what needs to be done at different levels of migration or stages of migration. Just give you a moment to go through this one. Moving on, steps for an extract migration. So when we talk about extract migration, it is also known as a big bang migration or an in-place migration. Okay, so it is actually a process of quickly migrating everything at once. MQSI migrate components command was offered in the IAB versions for this purpose. So what it basically does is it amends the data in the disk which the project uses to store all its configuration for the artifacts which have been deployed to that runtime. So when we talk about extract migration, what is it? The downside of this approach. The downside would be everything moves at once. So many would consider this harder to test and a higher risk than doing steps at one thing at a time. It does not migrate your source artifacts. So it does not leave you with an up-to-date bar file. You need to stop the broker for the changes to be propagated. So these are all some downsides of this approach. But when we talk about the line of processing, this is what it basically does. We will have to take a backup of the configuration, the Java key store files, and move them to the to be server location. We'll have to give them the permissions which are necessary for the read write of these file input, file output, the file read nodes in the NAS locations. We'll have to validate the odbc.ini file in the to be server. Then we will go about performing an MQSI backup broker in your existing IAB setup. Transfer the backup file created to your version 11. Um, Make sure that the queue manager which it was running with or associated with is also up. And then we will run this MQSI extract components command on the version 11. And finally, we will start the integration node. Okay. So the next approach is parallel migration. Parallel migration, like the name suggests, it performs a staged migration process by creating a new version 11 integration node to run in parallel with your existing integration node. You can then migrate your application logic from your existing integration node to your new integration node. Advantages of a parallel migration: you don't need to stop your existing brokers during migration. So this is like a primary advantage. You can migrate it to any hardware and computer which is supported. Uh, Code changes can be made in parallel with migration to take advantage of the new features of the product. You can choose which components to migrate in a controlled way. You can make changes to your client configuration as well. So this parallel migration can be done making use of the extract or doing a step by step from the scratch reuse by just reusing the commands from the IAB 10. So for parallel migration to happen, you can install an ACE environment, configure the environment completely from scratch and reuse just the command scripts from 10, and take the branch and version control from TFS or Git, and then deploy your bar files to the newer environment. So this is one way. The other way would be making use of the extraction itself. So after you install your ACE11 environment, you will make use of the MQSI extract components to configure the version 11 environment. So this will help create policies for you from the configurable services, for example, to help ensure you don't forget configurations from your version 10 systems. So discard the run directory contents because instead you're going to use your items from the new system one by one. So when you test something, then you turn the switch here and stop the one from your previous system, and likewise. So the line of processing indicates we will have to create the new nodes, be it a node or be it a standalone server, and start deploying your source code or bars to your the created node, creating a branch in SVN for the migration, copying the project content for the newer version, uh, replicating the odbc.ini setup, checking for the file permissions at NAS, and then opening the resources in the toolkit and creating fresh bar files, or you can opt for reusing your existing one, and then finally go about deploying. Then we can switch over. So these are few approaches for considering IAB version 9 and version 10 to ACE. The first approach uh, talks about moving it from IAB 9 or 10 to version 11 on-prem, extract and parallel. So whichever you seem fit. The second approach would be moving the workload to IBM Cloud, a managed service. So this would be refactoring the flows, applications in and making them callable. Like you can have a few applications deployed over cloud and call them from your on-prem and vice versa. The third approach would be on IBM Cloud Private. So you just deploy the bar files and you can refactor if needed. The fourth one would be on Cloud Pak for integration. So you upload your bar files, create a persistent volume, and an integration server on the Cloud Pak for integration. So we are planning to have another webinar which talks about ACE on Cloud Paks for integration later. So with version 11.0.0.7, IBM has provided an IBM Transformation Advisor. So what it basically does is uh, it helps to analyze and modernize your middleware based applications. The initial delivery collects information about what was deployed on your version 10 node and analyzes the data for potential issues or suggestions when moving your architecture to adopt a container-based deploymental approach. So this tool has some common concepts bridging each of the product domains. For example, each assessment measures the potential complexity of the required transformation as simple, medium, or complex. Each product also defines a guidance for what these categories mean and how we can go about in delivering a deployment to support a cloud native infrastructure. So transformation advisor, it analyzes and packages your on-prem workload for modernization. So it currently focuses on Java EE applications, your queue managers, and analyzes your existing integration node. So when it assesses or evaluates the applications based on your business needs. An inventory of application content and structure is made available, and potential issues and migration complexities are also assessed. It allows you to plan your migration. It identifies the key applications which would require an upgrade or a replacement, the effort associated with it for resolving these issues, and the recommended path. The next one would be to actually perform the migration. It bundles the generated system and assists in containerization and deployment. They are included and tailored for your application, these files. The dependencies are identified to help you completing the bundle or the deployment process itself. Okay. Further, we have different form factors of transformation advisor. It is available to us in three forms: the Transformation Advisor Local, which is in beta at the moment; Transformation Advisor Enterprise, which is part of the IBM Cloud Pak for applications, and this one is pretty interesting. So ACE, with its latest fix pack, it provides an built-in Transformation Advisor command line utility out of the box. You can simply execute that command line utility to get an idea of what applications and what applications that are deployed in your IAB 10 node and categorize them based upon the severity and the complexity. So when we say severity, we have like three systems which are supported: the Java EE, MQ, and IAB. When we say simple, from the Java standpoint, no code changes are needed. With MQ, DNS reconfiguration will be required. In IAB, a few admin changes would be required. When we say moderate, code changes are required, a cluster reconfiguration or changing the exit strategy in an MQ, and some developmental changes required in IAB incompatible with the ACE toolkit, and some external dependencies which we need to import as a jar file or something. When we say about MQ, client authentication should be reconfigured to support your current system. It can be a difficult developmental task or an alternate technology which is required when we talk about an IAB standpoint. When we classify them based on severity, we get three colors. Green, which is an info. It says no immediate action is required, but just to keep you informed. uh, Yellow or warning. So this talks about an immediate action which is probably required for as an advice before you proceed. Um, this is more of a warning. Red, that it means fatal. You cannot proceed to the next phase without taking a remedial action. Finally, we spoke about refactoring. Refactoring is essential. Refactoring cannot be ignored in a migration process, because even though we talk about an as-is migration plan here, we will have to make use of your to be system. What new features it provides, what are all the advantages it can put forward in your legacy when we are moving out of your legacy. So refactoring is a process of clarifying and simplifying the design of the existing system without changing its behavior. This is because an unfactored code tends to rot. So this is the ideology behind refactoring itself. You cannot leave your code unattended, or just because it is running does not mean there is no scope for improvement. Refactoring is basically done to improve your system's maintainability and keep it up to date and possibly extend its usable lifespan. So when we should not be performing refactoring, refactoring should not be done when the quality of the code cannot be improved. This is like a this should be in your rule book. You cannot perform refactoring just for the sake of it. It has to improve the quality of the code. It has to provide a better readability at least. And when once you have done refactoring, if you do not have time to test your code, let's say you are trying to perform a refactoring just before a few hours of deployment on your critical environment, so it is generally not recommended to do that at that particular point. It may break your existing logic. So when we do refactoring, the behavioral changes between uh, the source and target versions are taken into approach. That is the reason we perform a refactoring. We have a few deprecated or out of support nodes, and we have to modify them with the existing uh, newly built nodes. Reduced OS platform coverage. So when we are trying to move from a different platform completely, so re-platforming. Integration node versus a standalone integration server. So this is a topology which is currently employed in IBM's ACE. So we can have a standalone integration server, like I already told you. So you can think about the better deployment practices which can come into picture when we are talking about a standalone integration server, and you can decide if you were to opt for a node way of deployment or a server based deployment. Independent projects. uh, so in the earlier versions of IAB, broker projects or integration projects were supported, and those needed to be converted to applications. We have static libraries alone in version 9, and we got introduced with the concept of shared libraries in 10. So let's say you're doing from 9 to 11 directly, so you'll have to think of what can be made as a shared library also. When you're talking about deployment, you will have to end up restructuring your bar files, and then finally an hybrid integration scenario, like you are trying to interact with the SaaS apps. So for these concepts, you can think of having some callable flows deployed to the cloud and making use of them from your on-prem system, like on a hybrid platform. So all these are a few scenarios which you can consider for making an effective refactoring. Fine, we are performing refactoring. So what are all the benefits? So it is enhancing the productivity. So like I told you, you are extending the lifespan of your code, making it making it easier to maintain and relevant with the current architecture, agile to deploy new changes. So it provides a less decoupled manner. So everyone is moving to APIs. So you can also think of how to perform APIs, microservices, so that you can easily scale. You can call yourself a developer of a an agile deliverable. Modernization. So use of the available for streaming purposes, full API, including finally needs to be performed after we have planned our migration, we have decided on a migration strategy, we have delivered a migration, and then this is to maintain the stability of the migration which is performed, which is of paramount importance. So in ACE, we have the concept of server configuration YAML files. So these are located in your work directory. It contains the setting of your node or the server. So you'll have to overwrite it by making use of the MQSI change properties command to make it relevant to what you need. There are a few technical changes in ACE version 11. So you'll have to make sure that the contents which you are developing or the contents which are already migrated are following the relevant changes. You do not make use of some old nodes that are available and something. Reconfiguring the administrative security. So be it Java key stores or be it some configurable services, we are now making use of policies. So those needs to fall in place. Configuring administration security by using file-based permissions. Uh, so this is recommended. This is the best practices which is employed by IBM to make use of file-based permissions. Command environment using MQSI profile. So whenever you are kind of having two servers or two versions deployed in the same machine, you'll have to switch the profile, um, continuing the legacy resources in ACE. So uh, you'll have to ensure that your legacy connectors are still working. And the next step would be an optional one, but it can be useful for a few migrative personals to continue developing resources created in previous versions by migrating them. So let's say you are in mid of a migration project and you're trying to move to a different fixed pack or a different version. So you will have to consider the challenges which are present in switching over and then developing on top of your existing. So when we said about ODBC drivers, JDBC drivers, you are replicating those INI files, we'll have to test them as well to ensure the connectivity for these database drivers are all in place. So these are all few things which needs to be in place before the bar is actually deployed. And after deployment, you'll have to perform testing like with mapping nodes, if your project is having mapping nodes at a larger level, it is recommended that you have tested them thoroughly, because ACE has stopped the mapping node support from WMB 7, 8 and all. So only the latest mapping nodes are possibly allowed. Then having a wide range of test cases which are employed to test your DFDL based flows. So this is another recommended stuff, because there is a lot of improvements at the DFDL level. We have several new properties which are in place to ensure parsing from the DFDL domain. So these migration actions should be given that due importance and be completed to ensure the stability of your migrated platform. So that is a wrap. We have a demo set up on the use of a transformation advisor. So transformation advisor was newly available from the version 7 fix pack. It is it is helping us to aid in the transformation process itself when we are trying to modernize your applications on a cloud-based approach. So I have performed a recording, and it is also available in your webinars handouts. So I will just start the recording here. If you are facing some lags in the audio, or if the audio is not appealing, you can go over the video after the webinar as well. So I'm just turning on the video now. You can stop me if it is not audible. Preetham?
Yeah, Surendra, hi. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just turning on the video. So if you
Great.
find the audio not appealing, then we can probably, I'll just skim through the video with a few explanation of what needs to be done. And then we can kind of deliver the recording to them, to the attendees, I mean.
Yeah, sure. So, Surendra, just in case if you are facing any issues, right? So you can
Mhm.
just give a high level of the, what you're going to, talk about in the video.
Yeah, yeah.
And later on, maybe to all our attendees, we can go ahead and share the video so that they could also play it by themselves, right?
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Surendra.
Yeah. So okay, so let me just give you a walkthrough of what we actually delivered out of this App Connect Enterprise uh, using the Transformation Advisor IAB plugin. Okay. The Transformation Advisor, like I already told you, it helps to analyze and modernize your middleware-based applications. Until now, it has just focused on Java EE apps, an MQ queue manager, and providing guidance for improving your IAB nodes. So we have already seen the categorization based on the complexity, like it can be simple, moderate, complex, and we have like three severity classifications like green, yellow, and red. So this is already communicated. I'll just reiterate, like green is like an info. It says like, boss, I have recommended a few stuffs, but it is up to you to take it or not. No immediate action is required. Yellow, which is warning, immediate action is probably required and advised. Uh, Red, which is critical or an error, you cannot proceed without taking an remedial action. So to execute this one, we have to go over the console to execute the file. So what it says here is we will have to execute the TA data collector command. So this is the command line utility which is provided by IBM. It allows an environment variable to define the location where the logs from the command will be written. And we will have to run the command using the backup file from your IAB 10 MQSI backup broker, the result of that. So that is what it says here. We are firstly setting an environment variable. We are calling it TA data collector directory, and then we are running the TA data collector command. Uh, so this one, what it says is we are providing it with a zip file, which is probably your the backup file from your IAB 10 node, and all the outputs will be saved in your CATA demo. So that is the environment variable which you have set. So that is what is being discussed here. So here it is shown like we have already imported the contents from your IAB 10 toolkit. Uh, we have deployed them to that many integration servers to make the transformation possible and in an effective manner. So here we are just showing like what are the shared libraries which are deployed, the static libraries, be it some applications. So so this is a recap of running an MQSI backup broker command. I'll just play the video. So backup of the IAB 10. So this is the backup file you just created. Now we is moving over the console for ACE 11. So he's setting the environment variable to point to that location, and he's executing the TA data collector command by providing the backup file. So the run has been successfully completed. So these are all the folders which are uh, provided after the command has been successfully executed. We have an output directory, you have a logs directory, and a temporary directory, which is probably used by the command itself. So inside the logs, we can see there are like a few log files which are generated as a result of the command. And in the output, we have a folder created to replicate the broker name from IAB 10 with the list of servers, the integration servers which are created. And we have a recommendations.html, a static HTML page which is created. So when you open that, so this gives you a page which provides a list of integration servers, the complexity tied to it. You can see that there are several symbols. You can also see there is a complex at the bottom, and there are like few the colors which we spoke about, green being an info, and that one probably being a red, I guess, because it is complex and it is a red. If you go back, that is the total effort needed at the last column. So this is a pretty cool interface which is provided. You can directly click on them to see what uh, what is this? Why was it given a simple rating? What is the issue, and what is considered for providing such a recommendation? So here we are talking about considering a different protocol rather than relying on local file integration. So the solution would be the message flow has been found to contain a file input message flow node which relies on local file integration, and it is not configured to use FTP. Since 11 also supports reading from local files, we are kind of embracing a container based architecture. So you can think of placing this file in an FTP location. So this is like a info or a nice to know approach. It is up to us to take it or leave it. I was pretty impressed with the way this complete page is being designed. You can directly create documents out of it, showcase it to the client to even project your solution. So it says which application is affected, which node, and which flow. So that is that flow. Moving on to complex. So this says it has a transformation mechanism using .NET, and it is recommending you to use a different transformation mechanism in place of the .NET node. The message flow has been found to contain an instance of a .NET input or a compute. 11 also supports .NET, but there is no support for running the CLR command. So when deploying to Linux Docker containers, so it is recommending you to have an open mind of other transformation techniques which are available, like you can write an ESQL out of a compute node, Java content out of a Java compute, or recommending the mapping nodes in ACE as well. And it is going to cost you 10 working days is what it says, the effort. So this is the .NET node which it was talking about. So yeah, I mean that is from this example. I personally felt this was a very good step on top of the beta TA local and the cloud pack for applications availability of the TA. This can be tested by the developer itself so that he can think of different developmental aspects when moving to the cloud native infrastructure. So I would recommend everyone to go over this video. And that's a wrap from my end. Over to Preetham for any questions.
So thank you, Surendra, for the great presentation today. And thanks everyone once again for joining today's call, and you have a great day.